How's it hanging, beautiful people? I am Binz, your host for today, in this new video of the Shapez BEASTMAM series. Welcome to chapter 4 of our story. This series started off with a brief overview of the reasons why building a true make-anything machine, or TMAM, is such a big ordeal within the Shapez Industries mod, and video 2 and chapter 2 gave you a macroscopic overview of the machine. In the previous chapter, chapter 3, I spoke to you about some concepts and mechanics that are absolutely vital to this machine. Firstly, the importance of tick precision and tick synchronization, and secondly, how to work with code shapes in order to transfer compressed instruction packets from one module to another. With those videos behind us though, we have run our warm-up laps and are now ready to start the race for real. Chapter 4 will be a gargantuan chapter consisting of an expected, hold on to your hats, near to 20 videos. And that's because in chapter 4, we will be talking exclusively about the decoder, which is responsible for analyzing the input shape and figuring out how to produce it. In terms of size, the decoder unit alone takes up about half of the entire machine's wiring, and in terms of complexity, it is incomparable. Helping this decoder see daylight has been a Leviathan task, and because of its titanic level of intricacy, we will spend quite some time in this chapter. So make yourselves at home, there's milk in the fridge. Within this chapter though, we will still start off with a comparatively easy subchapter, and that is the need for WiresPlus. See, my initial objective, my initial thought was to make a Shapez Industries TMAM that wouldn't require any mods to be installed in order to be functional. So a TMAM that could be built fully modless, safe from the Shapez Industries mod itself, of course. However, I quickly came to the realization that that was impossible. Or let me put it in technically accurate terms, I came to the realization that I lacked the understanding to complete this project without any additional mods. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's unequivocally impossible. However, if I was to pull this project off, I didn't see any ways to do it if I didn't include one mod in particular, the WiresPlus mod by Skimnerfi. To understand the need for WiresPlus, let's take a step back and revisit the methodology of this machine. In a brute force algorithm, it will essentially try to virtually recreate the target shape, and if it manages, it will lock in the pieces that contributed to the successful attempt. But the bottom line here is that the decoder tries to create the target shape virtually. And in order to do that, it needs to be able to employ the same shape construction mechanisms as the actual physical production lines would. And therein lies the problem. The Shapez Industries mod adds some new concepts and corresponding physical units that notably lack a virtual counterpart. You get a physical combiner, but no virtual one. You get a physical smelter, but no virtual equivalent. All right. Now let's look at the virtual combiner first. At first glance, it seems perfectly possible and not that challenging even to get by without a virtual combiner. Again, the physical combiner on the right is included in the Shapez Industries mod, but the virtual one on the left comes exclusively with WiresPlus. So at first sight, I thought, if it's one of these combined shapes I need, well, then the signals for them are going to be contained in the target shape, and I can retrieve them that way. And that is not the part that poses the problem either. The problem arises when you get to the combiner stacking technique that we spoke about in the first video of this series. This particular shape, for example, could be one of the pieces you need in order to build the the target shape, and you are not guaranteed to be able to retrieve this piece from the target shape if you can't build it by means of a combiner unit. The only way to get a piece like this one without a virtual combiner unit is if you built it with the physical combiner first and then attached a belt reader to the output belt. That's how you could obtain the correct signal on the wiring layer if you didn't have a virtual combiner unit. And while technically possible, that would put tremendous pressure on the practical viability of the decoder. See, as I've mentioned before, the BEASTMAM's decoder builds one target shape every tick, and it often needs more than a few seconds to find the result. This means that the decoder, which is already as efficient as I could make it, may need to try hundreds or even thousands of piece combinations before it finds a winner. And if, for every one of those combinations, I needed to rely on this physical combining technique just to obtain a certain shape value on my wire that I can't obtain otherwise because I'm lacking a virtual combiner unit, then that would mean I'd need a heck of a lot more ticks per piece combo I'm analyzing. In turn, that would mean that instead of several seconds, this decoder would take several minutes to come up with a solution. And it doesn't stop there. You see these item spawners on screen right here, right? Well, as an unspoken rule, the Shapez community kind of agrees that you can't or shouldn't use these in your MAMs. And that's because if you could, then you defeat the entire purpose of building the machine in the first place, because you can just hook up one of these directly to the hub signal and voila, there's your entire TMAM built, right? One cell TMAM right there. So it doesn't work that way. If we are to use item producers, which is arguably kind of cheating to begin with, then it should at least be the other kind, this kind, the one that doesn't allow you to switch up the output by means of a wire connection. So if any one item producer only ever outputs one and the same thing, then that's kind of tolerable still. And what that means for our combiner story right here is that if we needed to resort to the physical combining technique in order to obtain this signal, then we would additionally need to create miniature MAMs as part of the decoder that would be able to produce these input pieces to begin with. And that would include having to build stacking modules and painting modules, input lines for shapes, and paint additional scaffolding pieces and a cutter array to cut away the scaffolding, just to obtain one specific shape value on a wire. One value on one wire, of which we might need up to a few thousand before the decoder can find a solution. So I hope I'm starting to make my point. Instead of having a decoder that is capable of coming up with a solution in a handful of seconds, the lack of virtual combiner unit alone would already increase that time a few orders of magnitude. The machine might need hours or even literal days to just find a solution for one lousy shape. And we're still not done yet. That entire setup would have to be built to replace one virtual combiner unit. And if we look, for example, at this part of the decoder, then I can already count 23 of them. So in order to get by without a virtual combiner unit, I would need to build literally dozens of miniature MAMs, all connected to belt readers, just to obtain some particular wire signals, of which we might need thousands in the end, right? So, possible? Theoretically, yes. Practically feasible? Not in the least. Not a fiber in my body was prepared to take that route. Nuh-uh, not gonna happen. And that explains just one reason I needed the WiresPlus mod for this. Another reason is the virtual smelter, even though pretty much the same logic applies. There are 12 smelting combinations, and replacing any one virtual smelter unit would entail building another mini-MAM that would be capable of physically putting that together just so we can draw the physical signal from the output's belt reader. And there's another thing. Since ultimately we want to build a TMAM, we need our machine to be able to handle any shape. And there are shapes conceivable that need to be smelted only after all of the pieces have been completely assembled. So in fact, listen to this, we would need an entire vanilla TMAM, complete with its own decoder and everything, to put together a shape physically, then run its output into a physical smelter unit, and then read the output with a belt reader, just to obtain one smelted shape output signal for one shape combination out of a range of thousands we might need to be trying. All right? I can only hope that the ludicrousy of all of this is slowly starting to dawn on you, right? Now, the same reasoning applies to two more virtual units. On one hand, we have the nipper, which we can use as a virtual replacement for the laser cutter. Even though the nipper itself is less flexible, we can still get by. And then next, the virtual layer painter as well. Now, the virtual layer painter is technically not part of WiresPlus. It's a separate mod by Danger1065 that he made specifically on my request. So huge thanks and kudos for that. But I feel the virtual layer painter serves exactly the same purpose as WiresPlus does, at least within this context we're working in, and that is having virtual equivalents of the special units that Shapez Industries introduces. So for all I care, the virtual layer painter could actually come included with WiresPlus, and the only reason it doesn't is practical. No one had ever brought up the lack of virtual layer painter to the mod creators before, because no one had ever attempted to build a TMAM in Shapez Industries before, right? Apparently, it takes a special kind of crazy to set that goal for oneself. Anyway, back to where we came from. So originally, my aim was to build a TMAM that, if possible, could be built without the requirement to install any mods other than the Shapez Industries mod itself. And since, given the contemplations we've just talked about, I decided for myself that I couldn't, or at least wouldn't, build it without WiresPlus. Well, in my mind, that kind of crosses a barrier into new territory. It kind of like turns a page. Once we have established that we can't get by without the WiresPlus mod, and we've deemed it a vital tool in order to be able to do this, well, then we might as well use everything that comes with it. In my mind, and feel free to disagree on this is just my point of view, right? But in my mind, the restriction applies to the mod as a whole. Once we've determined that we need to install a certain mod because we absolutely require some of its components, then I won't limit myself to using just those components either. I get to squeeze as much out of it as I can, all right? So, apart from the absolutely vital components we just talked about, the mod, WiresPlus, also includes a ton of stuff that is a bit less of a challenge to work around if you don't have it, but that just makes life easier, and in most cases just provides a one-cell solution for something that would otherwise require you to build little modules. You know, the memory cells, the edge detectors, the multiplexers, the diodes and buffers, the smart stackers, painter units, you name it. I have made a separate video specifically about the WiresPlus mod because I knew I would be recording this precise video one day. I want to invite you to go watch that because in future videos in this series, you will see an abundance of wiring units that come with WiresPlus. And since this separate video exists, I am not inclined to explain every time, this unit belongs to WiresPlus, here's how it works, yada yada yada. No, I'll be able to just skim over them and limit myself to talking about how I am using them in this BEASTMAM factory without mentioning other ways you could implement them, other practical purposes these units might have in different contexts. All right? Whew, so here we are, another video down, another step closer to unveiling this mesmerizing machine. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you're eager to find out what else I have in store for you for this series. And if you do, be sure to click the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you get updated when new videos are released. Also, feel free to give this video a thumbs up or leave a nice comment, all that good stuff. That's always greatly appreciated. And with that said, I've been Bins. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.